How's it going, Grady Nation? Chris Thomas here. Hope you're having a great A kind of day. And on this installment of Great A Nation, I have the great fortune of speaking with Nai Nicole. She is a podcaster, host of The Spirit Adventure. To learn more, you can go to www.thespiritadventure.com, instagram.com/ the.spirit.adventure, and facebook.com/the spirit adventure. No spaces or dots on that one. And I really encourage you to get familiar with Nai. Nai, how are you doing tonight?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on your show. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm really curious about this topic because I engage in solo travel myself. But
Mhm.
from your point of view, what does solo travel mean in terms of a mindset and approach to traveling?
That's a great question. Solo travel for me, in terms of the mindset, it really means just to have the freedom, but then also to be able to expand your thinking of how the world is around us. And I think it's such a beautiful thing to be able to experience solo traveling and have that firsthand experience. Not a lot of people, either they're afraid to solo travel or haven't done solo traveling before. And I highly encourage people to do it because it's such a a nourishing, like a soul nourishing experience, being able to just to be by yourself and learning how to navigate the world, meeting new people, learning new languages, and just realizing how small you are, in this vicinity of this huge planet that we live on. And, I think that has helped along with my self development journey and my spiritual journey, and just tapping into what makes me me and learning who I am outside of the labels that I surround myself with. I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, a friend, but I think with solo traveling, that has helped me to discover who I am. So I highly encourage it for sure for anyone, that would love to solo travel.
Now, in terms of that, because it sounds like in terms of gaining a clearer sense as to who you are
Mhm.
and where you are at within the world, you said, how small you are. Eh, And I was thinking, is solo traveling and the linkage to personal development a humbling experience, or what is it meant to be?
Mhm. For me, it's definitely a humbling experience, because I feel like, sometimes we get so wrapped up in our own world. We get wrapped up, watching the news and all that good stuff. And all of that is very informative. But I think just taking a firsthand approach, to actually getting to experience the world by yourself and learning how to navigate, I think with solo traveling, it really forces you to step out of your comfort zone. And, oftentimes, sometimes when you're too comfortable, you don't move, you don't really get to expand and learn as much. So, I like to be in a quote unquote uncomfortable position to where I have to force myself to step out of that comfort zone and learn more about the people that are around me. So, it's definitely a humbling experience, and it gives me that. I think when it comes to solo traveling, it definitely taps into the ego death as well. Learning how to kind of put your ego aside and step more into being present and spiritually allowing yourself to grow within this environment that you're in, you know?
Now, you started traveling as a nomad 4 years ago. What
Mhm.
sparked this journey of going from place to place 4 years ago?
Oh man. So I've been in love with the idea of traveling since I was uh, probably like an early teen. I would say 12, 13 years old. And um, just with my love for solo traveling and being a nomad, I ended up traveling to the Czech Republic. And I was a teacher abroad. I taught English for about 6 months. And I think just learning how to navigate in that situation, that has, hold on, lost my train of thought. Um, learning how to navigate the world as a nomad traveler, um, is so much that I've gained, especially, being an English teacher for the months that I was. It definitely helped to understand that although there's language barriers around me, we still can understand each other, by simple, you know, phrases, body languages, whatever the case may be. We're all on one accord. And once you get past the language barriers, it's such a beautiful experience. And again, to your first question, it's so humbling as well.
So, i- in terms of going from destination to destination, were you doing additional language teaching, or was that just that initial experience the launching point for your future travel?
That was definitely the launching point for my future travel. So I only taught English in Czech Republic, but I ended up traveling, of course, to Germany, Poland, Netherlands, and that I think just teaching English definitely launched my curiosity to meet more people. And along with that, although I didn't teach English in any other countries, I definitely put myself in a position to learn these languages of these countries that I was visiting. So I have the honor of knowing 5 languages, and, I would love to expand and do more, but I think that's what I mean when it comes to the self-development aspect, is that I've learned how to step outside of myself and really get to be involved with these people who live in these other countries. I'm on, their territory at the end of the day. So I pride myself in learning their languages and their culture. So I think, spending that much time in Czech Republic definitely has launched my curiosity further when it comes to traveling.
Now, for those who have an interest in solo travel,
Mhm.
what would you recommend that people try, especially female travelers that might be concerned about personal safety?
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely a good question, and of course a very big concern. So with me, I I pride myself on doing a lot of research, and I don't mean just googling the country and their language, their food, like extensive research before I do any type of travel to any type of country. So that means picking up a book, reading the history on it, reading the laws, reading the do's and don'ts, especially as a woman. Um, and learning how to be aware of my surroundings. If you think about it, although we live in this country and you know we we're always aware of our surroundings, we still have to be mindful and we still have to be cautious. We travel to work every day by ourselves. Well, some of us are teleworking, but hypothetically, we travel by ourselves a lot, just in our own hometown. So I think it's I think taking into consideration that, of course, it's a new country, it's a new location, but still being aware of your surroundings, having your wits about you. One thing I will say is, don't look like a tourist. If you look like a tourist, then of course, in those instances, you're going to be easily taken advantage of because you're going to look lost. You're going to need some type of a help. I would recommend anyone who wants to travel, especially any women that want to travel solo. If you're ever in a situation to where you're feeling lost, my advice and my recommendation is, step into a cafe or step into a bookstore in whatever destination that you're at, or any place that has like a good amount of people, and look at your map or call a Uber, whatever the case may be. So then that way you're not outside, looking lost. Taking pictures of the Ubers that you get into or the ride shares that you get into. A lot of these things we tend to forget because we're so used to doing it here in our hometown or in our, in our own neighborhoods. But stepping outside of the comfort zone again, you have to just be very mindful. So those are some things that I would recommend, especially for women.
So you're saying that if I were to wear my USA fanny pack and cape in Cambodia, that would be a bad idea?
Um, yeah,
I I'm
I,
jo I don't have a USA fanny pack or
you know,
cape.
you
Although, now I'm intrigued and I might wanna try that out and do it as a potential, YouTube vlogs,
You know,
seeing people's reaction to a
right.
USA fanny pack.
You know, it's very interesting because that's funny you mentioned that because when I was in the Czech Republic, there was a guy. I guess he was American. My assumption is he was American, but he wore an American flag shirt in the Czech Republic, and so things like that. I mean, kind of the males aside, more so for the women, I think it's just important for us to just kind of blend in. You know, do as the locals do, and especially for those concerned with safety or not wanting to stand out, just to kind of blend in and don't look too much like a tourist.
Now, this next question isn't meant to put you on the spot because it's something that I've thought about quite a bit
Hmm.
in my own solo travel. Is that I have a friend who's a fellow podcaster. His name is Blind Lawrence.
Hmm.
And, I think about him sometimes when I'm traveling, and I can only imagine how difficult it is for him
Hmm.
to try to attempt solo travel as someone that is visually impaired. And so, for some individuals who do have those struggles that do need assistance,
Hmm.
are how might they get the equivalent experience of personal development from solo travel if they require someone to assist them and they're not necessarily isolated in a way where they can reflect on themselves?
That's a good question. Um, so someone who is needing assistance, and and just a fun fact. So I was born with a disability. I was born with a radio club hand, which means I have four fingers on my right hand. And so I think dealing with someone who either needs assistance or someone who needs help in that aspect, I would recommend, although you want to solo travel and of course can definitely do that, if you're concerned with your safety or just with concern, with the traveling itself, I would highly recommend, sure, have someone tag along. But if you're still on that venture of traveling solo in that city, maybe, get a Airbnb or a hotel separate away from, the person that you're wanting to tag along with you, so then that way they're still within your vicinity and you won't feel, super alone, but still being able to have that adventure by yourself. Because with me, in my situation, when I first started solo traveling, I was nervous because firstly, I wasn't sure how people were going to react, physically, seeing my hand, but I learned to just, go with it and trust my instinct. And if I ever did need assistance, I made friends, while I was there. So although I was solo traveling, whenever I would go out or, have a drink by myself, I always made friends wherever I went. So I knew that I was still in a good space, and if I ever needed help or assistance, then someone was going to be there. So I would recommend anyone who, again, who doesn't feel maybe as comfortable or who just needs assistance in those situations, if you want to have a friend tag along, they can, and you could still do your own thing separate from them. So.
Yeah. And your podcast, The Spirit Adventure, which is available on Anchor and Spotify, it's
Hmm.
geared around travel and spiritual development, personal enrichment.
Hmm.
And I was just curious, is how has everything over the last 2 years influenced you in presenting your podcast and also perhaps changed your approach to traveling?
Most definitely. I think for me, for the past 2 years, I've been through a lot of like revamps when it comes to my podcast and my business for the Spirit Adventure. I started off as my company was Mind, Body, Souls, which was just strictly more so geared towards health and wellness. And so once I started taking into account more of the traveling aspect, I was like, you know what, let me go ahead and kind of intertwine both. And of course, with the COVID restrictions, that definitely halted a lot of traveling that I planned on doing. But I think that had catapulted a lot of ideas in terms of, well, if I can't travel right now, that's totally fine. So let me tap into the self development aspect and kind of show people that Although, sure, you may not be able to travel right now, there's still some things that you can learn about yourself while we're, stuck inside at home, learning how to grow your spiritual side and learn more about, your healing while we're, all healing right now. So I think that that definitely helped catapult more of these topics of self-development, even if my travel was halted a little bit. And I take pride in teaching people how to, be at one with self, even if they're not able to get out and travel as much as they want to. And learning how to meditate and quiet the mind, especially in this, chaotic world. So I think that that has been my journey for the past 2 years for sure.
And which destination that you have traveled to do you feel that you've vibed with the best, or that you've had the closest connection with, and why?
That's a great question. It's also very tricky because I loved all these places. um, I would definitely say Switzerland.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Oh, lovely.
yeah, yeah.
I've never been there, but I would love to. I would love to
Switzerland,
go to Switzerland.
yeah, Switzerland is gorgeous. It's gorgeous, and although I lived in Czech Republic and I only visited Switzerland, I think the difference that I had with Switzerland, it felt a lot homier, if that makes sense. It felt like I was home, and I think the beautiful thing that I realized about Switzerland is how multicultural and how much of a melting pot it is. So many different, people from different walks of life. And of course, everyone, from different walks of life are pretty much everywhere. But I think it just always fascinates me, about these different countries that we typically hear about or maybe don't hear about a lot. You come to find how mixed and such a melting pot of people that there are, backgrounds, cultures, religions. Um, and Switzerland, the views are gorgeous as well. So I think that's definitely one of my top favorite favorite destinations I've been to for sure.
Well, in terms of it being a destination, what
Mhm.
about potential residence for the future? Do you envision yourself potentially living there long term, somewhere down the road?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Because even while I was only there for a week and a half, but the Airbnb that I stayed at, it just felt like home. And so, you know, it's interesting because it's been I think 3 years since I've been in Switzerland, and I still long for that homeness that I had back there. So, yeah, I could definitely foresee myself living there as a resident in the future for sure.
When do you feel like you would feel comfortable transitioning into traveling with a friend or someone you are a partner with? Or do you feel like solo travel will be a constant throughout your life?
I definitely feel, I'll definitely make that transition to, travel with a friend or a partner. And, although solo travel is, it's my first love, I would love to experience life and traveling, with a friend of mine, for sure, because I think it's just so many stories that you can share amongst each other. That sometimes with solo traveling, you can only tell these people about, your experience as opposed to having someone actually experiencing it with you. So it's a lot of pros for both solo and like a group travel or, uh, partner or friend travel. But yeah, I could definitely foresee myself, traveling in the future with someone. So then that way we can experience it together and have that soul journey together. So,
Do you think that that changes the dynamic of personal growth in any way?
um, hmm. I honestly, I think with solo traveling, it's interesting because with solo traveling, you're with self and you're learning about yourself. And in some instances, you might even be talking to yourself, out loud in your hotel room or Airbnb, wherever you're at. and just having these conversations with self. So I think the dynamics of self development in a solo situation versus a partner or friend situation, um, you can still develop, your self development and your spiritual growth with someone. But I think it's more of a union situation to where you're both growing together and learning together. So I think with solo traveling, it's more in depth. And then when it comes to a group travel, it's more of an experience that you guys are both engaging in and learning about one another. So there's definitely some different dynamics for sure.
Now, you have an interest in life coaching, and I thought this would be an interesting area to explore with you.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the critiques that I get when I tell people about my solo travel adventures is that, oh, well, you're running away from your problems that are going on in your life currently, or you're not wanting to confront your personal issues.
Mm-hmm.
If someone were to say something like that to you, how might you respond?
So I've actually have gotten that before as well.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
I'm not I'm not the only one.
No, yeah, I've actually have gotten that before. To where people thought that I was like running away from something or just trying to escape. I'm like, no, I think for me it's more so just learning how to expand my life. How much more of life do I want to take in? And I think I've never been a person to stay at one place for a very long time because I just love to move around. I love to travel. So I think with me is more so just learning more about myself when I do these solo travels and trips because I think if I stay in a place for too long, I'm not really learning much more, if that makes any sense. So when I travel, it's more of a need to not necessarily chase because that's kind of the wrong word, but it's more of I guess for lack of a better word, it's more of a need for me to chase more of myself and develop more of myself and expand my thinking. So it's really interesting, just the preconceived notion that people think that oh you're running away from something, but it's complete opposite actually. It's I'm running to something, which is finding more of what I love, finding more of what you know I see myself in a it's more of like I see myself in a different light when I travel, and I come back a different person every time because I'm like wow, I didn't know this about myself that I didn't know prior. And so yeah, it's definitely an interesting conversation that people who are confused about solo traveling or get concerned, they always think I'm running away. I'm like no, I'm actually finding myself.
Now, the wrinkle within that is that you said for a certain period of time you've almost had your fill, and you've learned enough, as much as you can, being in that area. Do
Mhm.
do you think that there's an equivalency in your dynamics with people as well, in that your relationships with people have a shelf life? It's almost like I've learned, or I've gained as much as I can in interacting with this person, and I think it's time to move on. Have you seen a similarity in mindset or approach?
That's actually very interesting. You know, Along with the topic of self-development, one of my podcast episodes, I talked about detachment and understanding that everything in this life is temporary, and I'm a firm believer of that. People, places, things, we have to learn how to just be present in the moment and enjoy the things for what they are. And, you know, people break up, the next day and maybe not expected or whatever the case may be. I think when it comes to having a shelf life for certain things. That's not to offend anyone, but sometimes, relationships, friendships, platonic, whatever the case may be, they die out. And I think that definitely has some type of a correlation, especially when it comes to traveling and wanting to travel a lot. Um, And it's interesting that you brought that up because when you do travel a lot, of course, you meet new people and maybe past people that were once friends with, life just goes in separate directions. So, um, I think it's just more so finding who your tribe is and who attracts, with that lifestyle of yours. Because I think when you start to find people who are, kind of in that same mindset or that like-mindedness, then you're able to, form those connections with lifelong friends for people who, want to do the same things that you do. But I think it's important to learn how to detach from certain situations and things, because I think having expectations lead to disappointments, lead to heartbreak, whatever the case may be. So I feel like it definitely does have a correlation for sure.
And what tips do you have for those that are budget conscious but would
Mm.
like to travel and maybe do it solo?
Yeah, I think for those who are budget conscious, and I've been budget conscious as well. I think for me is to, if you're planning on solo traveling, save up like months and months in advance, and continue to stack up, so then that way you're prepared and well ready to go on your trip. Um, for me, I say at least give yourself a good 9 months before you decide to solo travel. Or if you're planning it already, give yourself at least 9 months if you're budget friendly or budget aware of or conscious of how much you're trying to spend. Just to give yourself enough time. And typically, if you give yourself more than enough time, then of course plane tickets are cheaper. You could buy them in advance and just kind of forget about it until you're ready to leave. So I think just giving yourself enough time to manage yourself, your time management and your budget management, can help in the long run for sure.
Now, I think this is where the life coaching dynamic comes into play because there seems to be a strategy be-
Yeah.
to all of this because
Hmm.
planning nine months in advance. I mean, a lot of folks, once they have the means to do so, they're going to go and travel.
Right,
they're,
right.
they're not really saying, okay, I'm going to save a little bit, put a little bit in the pot for a couple months, and then I'm going to go out and travel. So, really, in terms of the mindset and trying to grow as a person, solo travel does require a lot of planning long term.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely planning and discipline, and it's, as a good example. So I am actually planning on, hopefully, crossing my fingers with the restrictions, but I'm planning on leaving to New Zealand next September. So I've already started, planning budget wise, and just disciplining myself. So if it helps for anyone who has like, like a little savings or even just like a little piggy bank or a jar that has like, travel on the outside of the jar. Just put a little bit in each time. So then that way you're prepared. But, traveling, especially when you're trying to be budget friendly and have your time management skills when it comes to traveling, it's just having a lot of discipline. And um, it's a reward too. It's rewarding to see how much money like you're putting aside for this big special event, and it feels good to see that you're putting yourself first in that aspect. And of course, that's where the kind of the self-development comes in, the discipline comes in, to where you're like, you know what, I deserve this. Like, I want to go and see the world. So yeah, so I think it takes a lot of planning and discipline.
Now, other than New Zealand, do you have any other dream destinations? And if so, why might they be places that you would like to visit?
Yes, yes. My other dream destination, I'm hoping on taking next year, is Thailand.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, yeah, I would love, love, love to visit Thailand. I've been, so although I don't practice Buddhism as a religion, I follow it as a philosophy in a way, and just learning how to meditate and be at one and be at peace with myself in Thailand, I think can definitely give me that different aspect when it comes to being at one with self and learning how to quiet the mind. And that's been another destination that's been on my mind and my eyes for a very, very long time. And so I think just being able to experience that is going to open up a new part of self-development for me. And I can't wait to share that, with everyone on my podcast.
There's something intriguing within there because New Zealand, I mean, yes, the protocols with respect to travel, given the last 2 years, they are fairly strict.
Hmm.
But in terms of other things, New Zealand is fairly carefree.
Hmm.
Whereas with Thailand, in terms of a lot of cultural practices and things like that, they're much more strict. Do
Hmm.
you think that the contrast of the two places is something that intrigues you? Because what is it about those two in particular that stand out? Because they're very different.
Yes, yeah, they're pretty much like polar opposite. I think when it
I
comes,
didn't want to say it, but you said it for me.
yeah, yeah, I think what stands out for both to me, and to your point, yeah, New Zealand, it definitely seems like a more carefree country in a sense. And of course, I'm still learning about, the laws and what to do, what not to do. But I think what intrigues me about New Zealand is, the landscape, the people, and just how beautiful the scenery is. And I think what intrigues me about Thailand is the fact that it is, a little bit more, um, I guess, like culture based or people based, to where everyone just seems on one accord, especially with their practices. And so I think having those two dynamics, will have anyone on their toes, because I think it's a different form of self-development where you're learning, it's like on one end of the spectrum, you're tapping or diving deep into, the religious aspect of, certain parts of Thailand, and how they practice and how they meditate and how they quiet the mind and why they do what they do. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have New Zealand, which is, still very culture based. You have a lot of different types of people in New Zealand, different backgrounds. But I think for both equally, it's just the beauty of these people and the beauty of these locations that just really intrigue me. And, I can't wait to just learn more about both equally.
Well, I hope you enjoy both equally.
Thank you.
Because it leads me to something that I find interesting. Are there any travel horror stories or bizarre incidents that stand out?
Ooh, yes. Okay. So I was um I was in the Czech Republic, and you know, I I think also just being, a woman, a black woman, there's a lot of things that I have to be mindful of. And so when I went to Czech Republic, I was getting on the tram, or about to get on the tram or the train, and there was an older Czech gentleman that kind of walked really closely behind me, and it made me a little uncomfortable. And I stepped up a little bit, not too close to the train track, but he walked behind me and he said something in Czech, and I was trying to understand what he was saying because I know a little bit of it, but he said something in Czech and then followed by American, and so I was like, oh, okay, so maybe he's just trying to like sniff me out in a sense of like, oh, she's American. So I think that was kind of, and it's interesting because that's the only instance I've ever had like traveling to where I just felt a little uncomfortable because I wasn't sure what he was saying. I just knew that there was some type of like a disconnect. So um that's I think that's been the only thing that I've ever experienced, traveling.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean that is uncomfortable and unsettling, but I was expecting like a really scary incident
Oh,
given all of your travels. So,
yeah.
so that
Yeah.
one is pretty mild in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, yeah, and it surprised me as well. I mean, because aside from that, like, I've never experienced any type of, discrimination or, like, sexism, like, at least not just from my personal experience. But yeah, I mean, it kind of, I think it brings me back to, we're all human and we're all the same, but I've never experienced any type of major horror stories. It was just that incident to where I just felt a little uncomfortable, but I was like, well, this too shall pass.
Well, and perseverance and just ignoring the weirdo is the right approach.
Right, basically.
Now, is there a place that you expected to dislike or were kind of iffy about that you ended up falling for and just loving?
Mm, I can honestly say, so I hope I don't get hate for this, but I felt like when I traveled to Poland, I thought that was going to be the place. And, you know, predominantly, Poland is a predominantly, white European country. And so, being a Black woman in that vicinity, I wasn't sure how people were going to take that. But surprisingly, I got the opposite. And I love Poland, and the people are just amazing and beautiful and so friendly. And the food is amazing as well. Side note. But I think that, and that goes back to the self development and just really learning about these places on your own, because you might have a different idea about a country, or like, oh, they may not like me because I'm American, or they may not like me because I'm a woman or a Black woman or I have a disability, whatever the case may be. But it turns out to be the opposite. So it kind of, it's like that saying, don't judge a book by its cover. And it goes both ways, and so having to experience that different perspective, a different shift, I think that really opened my eyes to see that at the end of the day, we're all human, and it is our job on this planet to be able to, know who each other is, and to not be afraid to speak up or talk and have these questions. And that was definitely a humbling experience, and it definitely changed my perspective for sure.
Well, I really liked how that closed because I was starting to sweat when you said uh, Poland, and a little bit critical to start because I was thinking, oh, I'm going to get a whole bunch of negative podcast reviews on Apple Podcasts from folks from Poland that are checking in, because you can do a search of each episode, the transcript, and they say, "Oh, Nai Nicole said she was dreading going to Poland." No, I'm kidding. I'm teasing. But what are some other things that you would like to share with the audience?
Some other things I would like to share is, just learning. I would encourage everyone, even if you decide not to solo travel. I think just learning more about self, learning how to navigate in this world, and learning how to step outside your comfort zone. I think we get a little too comfortable or too complacent, with where we're at. And, that's fine for some people. And for others who are just ready and eager to get out and to travel and to see the world, I think that's the best place to start, is just starting with solo travel and stepping outside of your comfort zone. If it scares you, do it. I think what holds or what has held me back in the past is being too afraid to do something. So then I don't do it, but then I regret it later. So I think for me, my, I take pride and passion in, just going out and just doing it. Do what scares you. If it scares you, then that means that there's a bigger purpose for you to pursue whatever it is that is scaring you in that moment. And for me, when I first started solo traveling, it scared me a lot because I didn't know exactly what to expect. And so, I think learning more about myself in that sense of just do it. just be like Nike and do it. That's essentially it. And, again, for those who are eager and just ready to travel, I mean, that's all I can give is just say, just do it. And you're not going to regret it. I think, you're going to come back a completely different person with a completely different perspective on the world, on these people, that you've encountered. And it's such a rewarding experience.
Okay, I just want the record to show that it was Nai Nicole that used Nike intellectual property, so I don't want to get sued
Oh,
in terms
yes.
of the just
So,
do it.
so yeah, sorry about
No, I'm teasing. I'm teasing.
that.
Well, folks, I definitely encourage you to think about what Nai Nicole has talked about. Things like confronting your fears, enhancing your boundaries in terms of the self, and thinking about how you approach your life and what you would like to achieve.
Yeah.
So, folks, please give the Spirit Adventure a chance. www.thespiritadventure.com, facebook.com/ the spirit adventure, and instagram.com/the spirit adventure. Nye, thank you so much for being on Grady Nation.
Thank you so much for having me. I had such a great time. Thank you.
And folks, we'll see you next time. Take care.